Hello, this is Not From This World. Welcome back to my Daz Studio tutorial series. Today I just want to go over 8 basic techniques that are going to help you set up your scenes and make your rendering a little bit easier. Now, some of these you may already know. That's awesome. Some of these you may not have realized are a feature in Daz Studio. Now, when I discovered these, it really changed how I set up a scene, and it made things a whole lot easier. So as you can see, I've got a simple scene set up. I've got my girl standing kind of in a yard with some furniture behind her. The first thing I want to show you are limits. Now, you may have seen limits when you go to pose a character. For example, if I click on my character here and I select this pose where she's doing a cartwheel, and I click on it, it comes up with this tab that says the preset exceeds limits. And you have 2 choices. You can turn the limits off or you can leave them on. And so if I leave them on, the character will pose, but she will pose with these preset limits. So that actually limits the movement of the character. So if I go back and select this again, and then if I select turn limits off, then what it does is it gets rid of any limits that her body has. Now, I always just turn the limits off when I select a pose like this, but you can do this individually too. Like if I select her leg and I want to bend her leg, if you notice her leg has a limit. So it has a limit of 155 as we bend it, and then it straightens out and actually has a limit both directions. Now I can actually get rid of the limit by selecting this little gear and going to parameter settings. Parameter settings gives me this tab that shows quite a bit of stuff, but all we really care about is it says use limits. If I unselect that and hit accept, now those limits for that feature is gone. So with that limit off, I can now move her leg any way I want to. Of course, with a person, you know, we don't want to dislocate her poor knee, but this is just an example. So you can just simply hit parameter settings here and then get rid of the use limits. So just click off of that and you're ready to go. Okay, for the next trick, we're going to use some lighting. So sometimes when you're setting up a scene, you may be trying to get some dim light and you're working, you get your spotlight set up, but you're having trouble because the scene is dark and you can't move things around. It's really difficult to see what you're doing. There is a simple trick to this where you can light up your scene to work without actually adding any lights to the scene itself. This is very simple. All you have to do is go to your keyboard and hit CTRL L, and it'll turn everything bright, but when you render, it will use the lights that you have set up. The next trick, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that I didn't know this for a long time, but the next trick is really cool. You can select something like this girl's face, and as you pose, you may want to change her expressions. And if you've noticed that if I just kind of scroll down through the pose controls, you know, I can get a bunch of different expressions, but sometimes as you keep adding them, you get some really goofy looks, and you don't want to have to go through your parameters and reset them all to 0. There is a really easy trick. You just come up here and select the little person posing and just go restore selected items pose. When you hit that, it will reset her entire face. So now I can go in and I can add a surprised look, or I can add a laugh, and I don't have to worry about getting all of these crazy weird expressions. I'm like, oh man, I don't like that. And I have a lot of expressions, so scrolling through this is a pain in the butt. So I just go up to my little person up here, restore selected items, and it will just restore her expression back to the default, which is super cool. The next thing I want to show you is background. And so if you notice, if I zoom out, she's standing in a backyard, but there's no background. So if I render this, we're going to have this big white space. Well, there's a simple way to add a background. You want to go down here to environment, and first of all, you can add a color to the background. So if I just wanted to add a color like blue, I can do that. But I can also add a picture. And so what I've done is I just go to the internet, find a nice background picture, and then I can hit this arrow, go to browse, and then I've got a texture folder that I can select various backgrounds that I have chosen, and that adds some more realism. So once you have your background, you can go back to your scene and keep working. One of the things with backgrounds are they never move. So I'll give you an example of this. So if I zoom out here, see, I can take my camera and I can rotate it, but you notice how the background never changes. So just be aware of that. If you have something in the background like the sun or a sunset, if you put a background in, it's not going to move with your scene. All right, so that can be kind of an issue if you're a stickler for details. You know, you don't want the same exact background in a scene where you're changing positions of the camera. But that is a great method for adding some realism to your scene. Okay, the next little trick is duplicating something that you have in your scene. And before I knew this, I would have to add a new prop every time I wanted to duplicate something. But you don't have to do that at all. This is super simple. Like, there's this cup sitting on the table behind our character. Let's say I want 2 cups. Well, all you have to do is click on that cup, make sure it's selected, go up to Edit, then go down to Duplicate, then go across to Duplicate Node Hierarchies, select that, and what that's going to do is it's going to copy the cup. So see, now we have 2 cups, and select your second cup and just move it, and now you have 2 cups. Now this works pretty well for most things. What's also cool is if you group something and you copy the group, you will make everything duplicated. So for example, like if I take this cup and I add it to my first cup, you know, we do that a lot so that we can move both of them. See how I'm moving both of the cups? Well, now if I go to Edit, Duplicate, duplicate node hierarchies, I'm going to make an entire set. So now I have 4 cups. So this is just a really cool trick if you need to be adding a lot of the same prop to your scene. Just duplicate it and move on. All right, the next thing I want to show you is searching. Now, you can search a couple of things, like if I need a prop and I've got a bunch of content, sometimes it's a pain to find it, or you want to see what options you have. So you can come up here, click on this tab, and type in what you want. So for example, maybe I want sandals to our girl. So if I type in sandals in my content library, I am going to get all the sandals that I have installed. It's pretty cool how this works. It's not perfect, and you kind of have to play around with it, but you can see I have quite a few sandals that I could choose for my girl. So if I wanted to change her shoes into sandals, I can just type in sandals. Another thing that we can do is we can search our parameters. So let's imagine that I want to look for a certain expression. So I want to see what options I have to make my character smile. So I can go into our parameters tab and I can type in the kind of expression that I want, and it will give me all of my smile props. So now I can choose which one I want. Also, what's really cool about this is expressions like eyes. So instead of having to scroll through everything, so for example, if I have my pose controls, to get to my eyes, I have to take this bar and scroll through all of this stuff and then find where my eyes are. I don't have to do that if I search. I can just type in eyes and it will just pop up all of the options for eyes. So I, use the side to side eyes a lot, and I'll use up and down a lot. If I just type in my eyes, then I will get that. Now, one of the things that you have to remember when you do this, when you type in a search here, if I go back to my head and I want to look at, let's say, my mouth, I won't see it because I have to make sure I go in and delete whatever search I did, and then it goes back to the default. So if you are working and all of a sudden you're like, where's all my stuff? I can't find it. Maybe you have a search in there where you typed in something like eyes and now it's there. So all it's going to show are eyes. Let me give you an example of this. I'm going to type in eyes again. All right. So let's say I adjust her eyes. I'm really happy with what I have. And then I forget, so I just go back to my main character and select her because I want to maybe move her arm. Now, if you notice that when I go back to my main character, I'm getting all this weird stuff because I still have the eyes selected in my search bar. So I don't have my normal dials. I have to go in there and I have to delete that search. And now see, everything's back to normal. So the next thing I want to talk about is viewing your scene. Now, we all probably know that I can click on this and change my cameras, right? I can look through a spotlight and see where my spotlights are. I can adjust my view with the different cameras. But if you go up here and click on this little tab here, I can view multiple things at once. So for example, I can do a single view, which is what I'm looking at. I can do 2 side-by-side views, a top and a bottom, a 4 view, just whatever my preference. So if I select this 4 view, it's going to select 4 of my cameras. And so I've got my main camera, my camera 2, this default camera that came with the prop that I'm using, and the second default camera that came with the prop. So what's really cool about this is now I have multiple views of the scene. So if I want to make sure I'm moving her head correctly so it looks good in different views, I can move her so that I have multiple scenes. Now what's really cool about this is if you have that Man Friday's scene queue, you can see what all of your cameras are going to look like before you render them. And this just makes it really handy to set up your scene, and then when you're ready to render, just go back to single view and you're ready to go. For the final little trick, I want to show you how you can reset your workspace. Now I've had to do this because I'm working and I accidentally move something, I accidentally get rid of a tab, I accidentally move the workspace around where I don't like it. So for example, like if I take my parameter and I move my parameter tab and then I delete it by accident. When I do that, I take my surface tab, I want to move it, and then I accidentally just X out of it. Well, it's gone. And so I learned a simple trick that will put Daz Studio back to its default. And what you do is you go up here to Window, go to Workspace, down to Customize. And when you do that, just hit Defaults. And it'll give you this kind of warning that it'll default Daz Studio back to its original state. I use Daz Studio kind of in its original version, so this doesn't bother me. If you've totally customized your workspace, this is going to default it back to its original setup. So when I click it, it's going to add everything back to its original position. And this is a good thing because I have accidentally moved a tab where I could not find it and it was gone. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get that back. See, my parameters tab is now back where it should be. I have to change a few things to get it back to my original setup. But if you need to reset Daz Studio, this is the best way to do it. So again, it's just Window, Workspace, Customize, change it to default, hit Yes, and you will reset Daz Studio, get your workspace back to how it was when you were working with it. Hey, so I hope these 8 little tips helped you, and that you learned something from today's video that allows you to work a little bit more efficiently in Daz Studio. These are really basic tips, but they have really helped me get my scenes going and get my rendering up and running quicker. So if you like my video, please hit that like button. If you're not subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel, and please give me a comment or two. I'd love to hear from you and hear your tips hear what you like, what your challenges are, and how you are doing in Daz Studio. So until next time, take care, and I will talk to you soon.